Astrology for Divination is proud to present Archaeoastrology Decolonize Your Horoscope, a free ebook.
Namaste, I'm Neerja, your AI narrator, and this is the Dendera Zodiac of ancient Egypt.
Namaste, I'm Prabhat, your other AI narrator, and the original Dendera Zodiac was discovered in the temple of Hathor.
Rest, relax,
and receive the celestial wisdom of the ancients. Summary. Archaeoastrology Tilde inspired by Archaeoastronomy Tilde seeks to uncover what was astrology's authentic function in its original cultural context. This thought piece weaves together across comparison analysis exploring 1. Mesoamerican calendar cosmology 2. The I Ching Book of Changes and Taoist cosmology 3. Vedic astrology and the Dasha system of prediction 4. Ancient Egyptian cosmology 5. Metaphysics, time, and divination. Rule 6. Matriarchal aka matrilineal consciousness. My intention with writing this astrological analysis is to identify possible points of intersectionality between ancient wisdom systems. By looking for correspondence in multiple ancient astrological sources, archaeoastrology can triangulate information searching for patterns of resonance. This intention is fueled by my never-ending curiosity regarding how antediluvian matriarchal cultures developed, functioned, and perceived the cosmos. Throughout the evolution of patriarchy, patriarchy over thousands of years of war and colonization, much cultural wisdom has been lost. Then add on to that the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas at the end of the last ice age 12,000 plus years ago, a moment which all ancient civilizations mythologized as the Great Flood, and you may realize that our perspective of the antediluvian matriarchal world is clouded by patriarchal amnesia. In order to even begin the process of reconstructing the prototype, curious students of authentic astrology in modern times must be open to studying astrology from the past. This metaphysical pursuit perhaps requires acknowledging how linear or mundane time has blocked humanity's psychic potential to perceive the cyclical nature of sacred time. Cause and Effect Comic Illustration, first published April 1944 in Astrology, Science of Prediction by Sidney K. Bennett.
Preface: Astrology is political. Decolonize, verb, refers to the process of freeing a country or region from colonial rule, or the re-examination and change of a subject field or tradition to counter the belief that the culture of a colonizing power is superior. Decolonization can involve indigenous peoples reclaiming their culture, language, and history, which may have been suppressed or erased during colonization. Decolonization can also involve critically examining and challenging Eurocentric or colonial perspectives in education, research, and other fields. Despite its ancient origins, astrology has been labeled New Age. Why is astrology so quickly thrown into the same intellectual trash bin as aliens, UFOs, and flat earth conspiracy theories? Why do so many skeptics belittle astrology's value without any personal inquiry when astronomy was seemingly sacred to our ancient ancestors? Why is astrology limited to the spiritual sphere of religion and belief? Electional astrology, astrocartography, medical astrology, astropalmistry, and astroherbalism all suggest that there is much more depth to this discipline worthy of intellectual inquiry beyond blind faith. The dominant culture in the global north has systemically denied, distorted, and suppressed evidence proving that the indigenous ancestors of colonized cultures had advanced astronomical wisdom which influenced their architecture, agriculture, and spirituality. Especially in the USA, aka Turtle Island, there is considerable political motivation by white Christian nationalists to deny the advanced astronomy of North American indigenous monuments and sacred sites in order to avoid accountability for land theft and cultural genocide. Everything is political, and astronomy/astrology is no exception. 13 moons and 28 days on all turtle shells. This equals 364 days plus 1 day of rest. All indigenous people around the world knew the wisdom of the turtle and followed a 13-month calendar. After all, there are 13 moon cycles in a year and 27 to 29 days per cycle. It's almost as if the white man subtracted 1 month in order to sever the connection between the people and the sun, moon, and stars, which are themselves a giant clock. Decolonization is not a metaphor.
As an astrologer and curious student of Vedic and Mayan and Chinese astrology, Western Hellenistic sun sign online social media astrology, in which there are all these ego stereotype identities constructed around the 12 zodiac signs, is a bunch of bullshit and shenanigans because there's a 13th sign. Ophiuchus, excuse my pronunciation, is a mysterious 13th sign that it actually comes after, not the end of the traditional Hellenistic zodiac. So it's not following Pisces, but it actually follows Scorpio, and it's related to the mystery, the Plutonian mystery of Scorpio. So that right there, again, if you're truly interested in the authentic, ancient, sacred science of astrology, you have to acknowledge astronomy, and there's a lot more going on than just 12 constellations. Yeah, decolonize your chakras, decolonize astrology now.
Introduction: Serpent Mound, Turtle Island. Serpent Mound in Ohio, USA, aka Turtle Island, is an earthwork mound or effigy which survived settler colonialism and exhibits advanced astronomy. Scientific debate swirls around this stunning site despite Serpent Mound's clear astronomical features marking the solstices and equinoxes, solar alignments, and circumpolar star alignments. Quote: "The earthwork is aligned exactingly to the north. Numerous other features show that its builders oriented it to astronomical phenomena in a startlingly rich and detailed fashion and built it in accord with precise principles of geometry and arithmetic." Many other prehistoric earthworks and stonework also show astronomical and mathematical connections, but it is one of the aims of this book to demonstrate how the Great Serpent Mound is unique in the sheer number and complexity of these connections. In this regard, it exceeds even the Great Pyramid of ancient Egypt or the Parthenon of Greece. Truly, it is a wonder of the prehistoric world. The mystery of the Serpent Mound boils down to the questions of who designed it, who constructed it, and why. It is probably beyond our capacities to determine exactly what our serpent was signifying. In the opinion of some, it is a Manitou, a Native American term for spiritual entity. I would take this notion a step further, being now convinced that our serpent is Gitche Manitou, which is to say, the great spirit and ancestral guardian of the ancient people. Yet while the Great Serpent has long been believed to be a treasure indigenous to North America, there are undeniable connections in its design to distant regions of the ancient world. End quote. Quote: "The stars near the North Celestial Pole in the era circa 1000 AD are of minor importance, except as they mark the North Celestial Pole in that era. The stars above Thuban are similarly of minor importance, except that they mark the triangulation line to be taken to the North Ecliptic Pole, and then, bonanza, when one connects Thuban, the North Ecliptic Pole, the North Celestial Pole, and then draws a middle line through Kochab from the North Ecliptic Pole, then one has a superb triangulation of precession." The Great Serpent Mound, in our opinion, thus marks the successful calculation of precession in Native America by the astronomers of that era, whoever they were, and it has been done in a magnificent triangulation. It was surely a momentous achievement and arguably immortalized in the Great Serpent Mound as a great advance in knowledge. The Great Serpent Mound was used to calculate a passage of 50 degrees or precession in principle, which is a period of 3,600 years, or perhaps at this location they calculated only 25 degrees, which is a period of 1,800 years. There is yet another, rather unexpected explanation for the heavenly serpent having a ball type of figure or a cosmic egg of some kind that it is chasing. It is the path of the sun through the Milky Way, i.e. our galaxy. The position of the north celestial pole circa 11750 BC near the large star Vega in Lyra is also near the so-called solar apex or apex of the sun's way, whose antipole, aka antipex, is near Sirius on the other side of the heavens. Our solar system is moving toward Vega and away from Sirius. Earthsky.org writes, our sun's direction of motion, and thus our Earth's corresponding motion, toward Vega has a special name. It's called the apex of the sun's way. Vega, the solar apex star, can be found in the eastern sky during the dawn and pre-dawn hours throughout the winter season. Bottom line, our sun moves toward the star Vega as it revolves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. One circuit takes about 230 million years, or 1 cosmic year, end quote.
Racism has fueled the systemic cover-up of evidence suggesting that humans have inhabited North America for at least 2 million years. Archaeology, whether consciously or unconsciously, continues settler colonialism's tainted legacy of supremacy ideology. The Adena Hopewell earthworks, along with Serpent Mound, document the precession of the equinoxes as star maps. Unfortunately, many of these earthworks in the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys were destroyed by barbaric settler colonialism, but documented by the Smithsonian Institution. What is a star map? Martin Sweatman and Graham Hancock argue that the vulture on Pillar 43, perhaps symbolizing Cygnus, is a date stamp for a comet impact 13,000 years ago. It appears Göbekli Tepe was, among other things, an observatory for monitoring the night sky, Sweatman said. Pillar 43 seems to have served as a memorial to this devastating event, probably the worst day in history since the end of the Ice Age. This is spooky and eerie, Hancock said, because it appears there's overwhelming evidence that the people who made Göbekli Tepe had a profound knowledge of precession. Cygnus contains Deneb, one of the brightest stars in the night sky and the most distant first magnitude star, as its tail star, and one corner of the summer triangle, the constellation forming an east-pointing altitude of the triangle. Its molecular clouds form the Cygnus Rift Dark Nebula constellation, comprising one end of the Great Rift along the Milky Way's galactic plane. Martin Sweatman, along with Graham Hancock, argue that the carvings on Pillar 43 are in a clockwise progression that represents the constellations in the night sky. It is our Rosetta Stone, Sweatman proclaims. Astoundingly, he then asserts that the pattern of asterisms could only have occurred on the day a comet struck Earth 12,800 years ago. If true, it would be one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made. Stone Age people documenting a comet strike that may have occurred 12,800 years ago deserves a full spread in a top scientific journal, such as Nature or Science. At Monk's Mound, the mysterious Birdman star map tablet was discovered, which is eerily similar to the vulture depicted on Pillar 43 of Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. The Birdman tablet of Cahokia, Ohio, is most likely a sky map circa 500 CE portraying the astronomer surveyor priest at midheaven, with their eye at Ursa Minor, North Celestial Pole, and their heart in Cahokia at Ursa Major. Their earring is Woodhenge at the Celestial Meridian. The crow's hatch pattern on the back of the Cahokia Birdman tablet is superimposed here, properly flipped horizontally, on the front of the tablet, resulting in the recognition that the astronomer surveyor priest's eye is directly in the middle in the second row from the top, which we think strongly indicates that the crow's hatch was used for sky measurement. Diagonal distances are calculated 60 degrees of angular separation, measured from the stars of today's Camelopardalis in the right lower corner to Lambda Boots in the upper left corner, and from the north ecliptic pole in the right upper corner to the star Tania Australis in the left lower corner. One crow's hatch diagonal was then shrewdly measured as 6 degrees. Ultimately, this reinterpretation of the Birdman tablet as a star map by archaeoastrology disrupts the settler colonial perception of mainstream archaeology that the crow's hatch is only symbolic in nature. This claim that the crow's hatch is a religious representation of snakeskin is one, a stereotypical misunderstanding rooted in settler colonial blind spots, and two, a projection of Eurocentric perceptions. Like many anomalous ancient artifacts, archaeology's compartmentalization from astronomy has perhaps concealed hidden multidimensional meaning which requires familiarity with the artifact's original cultural context. For example, Google Earth Pro Map with red lines added by Andis Collins using the Google Earth Ruler menu line option reveals that the Cahokia Birdman tablet shows precisely this ancient land survey of the Americas. Thus, the Birdman tablet perhaps is not just a simple work of art from a supposed primitive culture, but in fact, a sophisticated and multifunctional analog calculator which was used by the ancients of Turtle Island for astronomy and geomancy, land surveying. Many ancient cultures around the world have legends of the celestial birdman, which describe in various forms some sort of half-human, half-alien creature. These tales are possibly connected to our universal psychological yearnings for flight. In liturgical literature and visual art, for instance, the appearance of angels or simply humans with wings may be the result of our innate desire to soar above the earth into the realm of God. The soul itself is sometimes portrayed as winging up to heaven. More archaic traditions conceptualize the bird as a psychopomp, carrying the soul to the underworld. The birdman is a particular type of therianthro, a Greek word that literally means beast man. Myths of this crypto creature are not confined to any one continent but are found in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, Africa, North and South America, and Australia. Many people with even a casual interest in Egyptology are familiar with the falcon-headed solar god Horus, son of Osiris and Isis. Each pharaoh became the manifestation of this protector deity in life and Osiris in death. In addition, the ancient Egyptians recognized Ibis-headed Thoth as the lunar god of knowledge, writing, magic, and science.
The Path of Souls. As a student of Mesoamerican calendar astrology, Vedic astrology, and the I Ching oracle, I couldn't help but notice some key similarities between all three of these ancient civilizations. Is their sacred wisdom a result of divergent evolution from a shared source or convergent evolution from different developmental streams? For the sake of triangulating information, in this cross-comparison analysis, we will focus first on synthesizing the similarities before detailing the differences of Vedic, Mesoamerican, and Chinese cosmology. These three ancient astrological systems have all survived by some miracle despite the horrors of occupation, war, and colonization. Furthermore, they are still in use by modern astrologers of the contemporary cultures, making them a perfect case study for triangulating information. In logic, one compares information from at least three sources in order to discern possible patterns of resonance. I also will weave in corroborating information from ancient Egyptian cosmology for good measure. Let's start first with what seem to be foundational similarities in thought or spiritual synergies. By studying ancient ideology, cosmology, and linguistics, we see clear evidence of a diffusion of similar spiritual ideas and ideas. Linguistics offers intriguing insights into the cultural evolution of our ancient past. For example, did you know that all European languages, including English, are descended from a single prehistoric language of the Indian subcontinent? This mother language has been linguistically reconstructed as Proto-Indo-European, spoken sometime during the Neolithic or Early Bronze Age circa 3300 circa 1200 BC. This highly suggests that Vedic civilization, in particular the Indus River Valley culture, is the primordial mother culture of later, pagan, aka indigenous, Europeans like the Finns, Slavs, Celts, and Germanic peoples. What's even more interesting is that a shared linguistic influence can also be observed between the ancient Maya language and Sanskrit. What the Vedic yogis call Kundalini, aka the serpent fire energy, the Mesoamerican daykeepers would have called Keutalini or Koyupa, aka the electricity of the blood, aka the path of Quetzalcoatl, aka Keukeltan, the feathered serpent, which the Chinese Qigong masters would perhaps call Shen, the spirit heart energy. What the Chinese Taoists call Qi, the Vedas would call Prana, which the Kitchmens most likely would call Ikik. Furthermore, the Chinese dragon is very similar iconography to a Mesoamerican feathered serpent and the Vedic Nagas. Perhaps all three of these ancient civilizations were describing the same mysterious phenomenon of metaphysical subtle energies, but simply in different terms, often coded in spiritual stories, aka myth. Even though some yogis may disagree over whether African and South American yoga is authentic, hopefully we can all agree that the global north must decolonize yoga. Acknowledge the harmful cultural appropriation and cringe whitewashing of yoga. Boycott the Yoga Alliance certification scam. The Yoga Alliance of Virginia, USA holds no authority over the standardization of yoga. Yoga as a practice was refined by black and indigenous people of color who should not have to pay money to an American private corporation to share their culture. Period. These three cosmological wisdom systems also all document subtle energy centers in the human body, albeit with their own interpretation or flavor. The Vedic chakras of yogic science are similar to what the Kitch-Maya call chakras and what the Chinese call the danshans. Yoga is a very similar word to the Mayan word yoga. Whilst this topic is controversial for modern Indians, without a doubt we know the ancient Mesoamericans and Egyptians also practiced yoga, given various works of art found depicting well-known yoga poses. Many of these works of art are in fact from the more ancient Olmec civilization which preceded the Maya and Aztecs, suggesting the Olmecs were the source of this spiritual wisdom. Finally, all three systems acknowledge polarity or duality as a fundamental key principle of the cosmos, Shiva and Shakti, yin and yang, day sign and number or Tzit-Kol Beidel. On a deeper level, this means that archetypes are inherently dualistic in nature, i.e. any archetype has both a yin and yang polarity expression. In Chinese cosmology, a planet's yin aspects are judged by triangulating its positioning to the moon and its yang aspects by triangulating the planet's positioning to the sun.
Short reel form, I would like to offer a brief case study of why it's so important in the new cage, online pop astrology, McMindfulness, yoga cult world to actively decolonize your beliefs and actively research BIPOC sources, especially regarding any claims about what a chakra is and what a chakra corresponds to. For example, so many people in the West believe that the third chakra, Manipura chakra, which is translated into solar plexus in English, is related to solar energy and is therefore obviously governed by the sun. But then if you research at least 3 different Vedic sources, just at least 3, come on y'all, put a little effort. Vedic astrology teaches that perhaps the sun actually governs the sacral chakra, the second chakra, Swadhisthana, and Jupiter and or Mars influence more Manipura, the third chakra.
Mudras are meditation gestures which cultivate subtle energies. On the left we see a man match God doing the Vardha Mudra with the right hand and Abhay Mudra with the left hand. On the right we see the Buddha doing the Abhay Mudra with the right hand and the Vardha Mudra with the left hand. Coincidence? The 7 serpents perhaps symbolize the 7 chakras aka chaklas. Ancient Sanskrit texts such as the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Puranas describe the Nagas as a powerful, splendid, and proud semi-divine species who manifest their physical form either as human, often with a cobra hood behind their head, as a partially human serpent, or as a whole serpent. The Naga archetype symbolizes the polarity of destruction and creation. Rig Veda mentions that the Nagas were deities worshipped on a daily basis during the Yajurvedic society. Atharva Veda mentions various prayers and offerings for the Nagas. The Vedas further refer that Nagas are spiritual saviors of humanity. On the left we see the Egyptian deity Hapi encircled by a flying serpent. On the right we see the Olmec deity Quetzalcoatl also encircled by the feathered serpent Upanakan. These reliefs most likely symbolize Kundalini energy. On the left we see Egyptian sky goddess Nut supporting the hieroglyph sign for sky. On the right we see 2 Olmec figures supporting the same hieroglyph for sky, repeated 4 times. We see countless similarities between these ancient civilizations. Is this a result of divergent evolution or convergent evolution? Still convinced it's just coincidence? On the left we see Lord Hanuman of the Ramayana text by Valmiki, a foundational work in Jyotish astropalmistry. Hanuman symbolizes Jupiter. Here we see a Mesoamerican statue of an elephant, which went extinct in the Americas at the end of the last ice age. Is this a representation of Lord Ganesh via ancient Mexico? Here we see a Mesoamerican artifact with the Vedic solar wheel in the Teotihuacan style. This symbol can be observed in countless ancient cultures prior to cultural appropriation in the 20th century by German bootlicker Nazis. One of the earliest marital alliances of Egyptian and Vedic cultures was between Mitanni princesses Gilukchipa and Taduchipa married to Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III in the 14th century BC. The Mitanni were most likely a Vedic civilization in modern-day Syria and Iraq. Why so blue? Notice how blue skin is a motif in both ancient Egyptian and Vedic art. Likewise, both cultures sanctified the lotus flower as a symbol of enlightenment. The medicinal use of blue lotus is well documented in ancient Egypt. There are many taboo mysteries invoked by these similarities between ancient civilizations. For example, the global phenomenon of elongated skulls is a hidden connection which has been heavily suppressed by patriarchal gaslighting in settler colonialism's false narratives.
Respect the ancestors. Return the ancestors to their original burial sites. Repatriation now. Many of these ancestors' remains were illegally sold to museums without consent of their descendants, where they stagnate in a swamp of colonial bureaucracy, misunderstood by patriarchal academia, whom have gaslit the public with active disinformation about the ancient phenomenon of elongated skulls. For example, this bust of Nefertiti, one of the most famous stolen ancient artifacts currently in Berlin, clearly depicts the Egyptian corregent of Pharaoh Akhenaten with an elongated skull and neck. The royal family of the Amarna period are all depicted in the art as having elongated skulls. Whether or not the Amarna royal family had elongated skulls is unknown until their mummies are located and confirmed via genetic testing. We know that King Tut's mummy has a slightly extended skull, much smaller than what's depicted in the royal art, suggesting that upper castes were attempting to emulate the extended skull shape via cranial deformation as a sign of status. Therefore, the art could be political propaganda implying that the 18th dynasty's bloodline had the divine right to rule because they were direct descendants of the elevated ancient ancestors. Story behind this image. This is not an alien skull, but the Mangbetu tribe binds babies' heads to elongate skulls, seen as beautiful and intelligent. Many sensationalists question if the elongated skull peoples were alien in origin. Perhaps a better question is, why were countless indigenous cultures binding babies' heads across the ancient world to begin with? Why and how did the legacy of cranial deformation evolve? Why? Are the elongated skulls proof of human devolution? The Vedic alternative of human devolution challenges the Darwinian paradigm of evolution. The Vedas suggest that humans have devolved during the descending Kali Yuga cycle from a more evolved state in past cycles. This is counterintuitive to ordered linear thinking of Darwinian evolution, suggesting that the ancient human past is much more complex and convoluted. Vedic devolution disrupts the myth of progress and manifests destiny inherent in Eurocentric colonial perceptions.
Who were these ancestors with elongated skulls? I do not subscribe to the ancient alien theory, as that is rooted in racism. Rather, I intuit the elongated skull peoples were an indigenous subspecies of humans from Earth, of flesh and blood, who evolved in a different timeline of deep antiquity, in ancient Egypt, the period called ZEP Teti. Perhaps this ancient branch of humanity are the third-party maritime mother culture whom developed astrology, astronomy, and megaliths.
The third-party hypothesis proposes that a primordial mother culture likely evolved during the last golden age in the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods, corresponding with the last age of Cancer and age of Virgo.
The third-party hypothesis is a new branch of archaeological thought stemming from the revolutionary studies of archaeoastronomy. Archaeoastronomy as an evolving discipline rediscovered how sacred sites, pyramids, megalithic temples, mounds, and earthworks are aligned with various constellations and/or electromagnetic ley lines of the earth. E.g. Dr. Robert Bowell has proven that the main three pyramids on the Giza Plateau are an indisputable recreation of Orion's belt given these stars' importance in the corresponding Osiris origin lore. By using computer software, we can also now recreate the ancient skies of the past to arrive at an exact timestamp of when these megalithic structures were in perfect alignment with its corresponding celestial constellation. This has completely redated many ancient megalithic structures' timelines, suggesting that the Western mind must expand our chronology of ancient civilizations way back before the Ice Age and younger Bias catastrophe. Orion, aka Osiris, exhibits north-south symmetry. The best example of geometrical asterisms in the night sky is the Winter Triangle. It's a perfect equilateral triangle made up of three bright stars from three separate constellations. It's made up of Betelgeuse from the constellation Orion the Hunter, Procyon, the brightest star in the small constellation Canis Minor the Little Dog, and Sirius, aka Isis, the brightest star in Canis Major the Big Dog. In 10,500 BC, Orion, at its lowest culmination point, formed a perfect right angle with Sirius, as mirrored on the Giza Plateau.
Teotihuacan, Pyramid of the Sun. The Pyramid of the Sun's size is such that it immediately draws parallels to the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. In fact, almost unbelievably, the base of the Pyramid of the Sun is virtually identical in size to that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, which measures 230 m. And it isn't just the size of the Pyramid of the Sun that strikes a chord, for it also sits amidst a trio pyramids that appear identically aligned to those of the Giza plateaus. At Teotihuacan, these pyramids are known as the Pyramid of the Moon, furthest north, the Pyramid of the Sun, central, and the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. Furthermore, the alignment at both sides clearly reflects the alignment of the three stars of Orion's belt. This has brought about some notable theories on ancient transoceanic contact and the plausible existence of an ancient super race who spread knowledge of geometry and astrology across the globe. These superhumans are thought to be recorded in prehistoric artwork using animal forms to describe their origins and their wisdom. This, it is argued, explains the many strange and often similar anthropomorphic gods that are found throughout the Americas, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and the Far East. The Maya, who did have writing, created an enormous third clock to produce the long count that offered a cycle of 5,125 solar years. This immense cycle of time was known as a sun, and to stele at the Mayan city of Quirigua record the fourth sun as beginning on the 11th August 3114 BC when a god called Itzamna placed 3 hearth stones to create a home for humanity. These 3 stones are associated with the stars of Orion, and the date, the 11th August, is one of the 2 dates that the Pyramid of the Sun faces the sunset to create the 260-day period. This presents the possibility that Teotihuacan was perceived to be the place where Itzamna placed the 3 stones of creation and that the 3 pyramids are symbolic of these 3 stones. This would also explain why the pyramids are aligned with Orion and also why the Pyramid of the Sun locked in onto the 11th August 3114 BC. Curiously, the first dynasty of Egypt also began in around 3114 BC, with the legendary king Menes combining the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. In the same way that the measurements of the pyramids equal one another, it is also possible that a global or celestial event of enormous significance occurred on this date, which was subsequently locked into the creation myths of both civilizations and represented by Orion. Star map at Nabta Playa, Nubia. It is very curious indeed how the beginning of the Maya long count calendar corresponds with the exact emergence of patriarchal Pharaonic, aka dynastic, Egypt. The same Orion's belt alignment can be found in the Nabta Playa stone circle site in the deep deserts of ancient Nubia. Does Nabta Playa suggest that Nubia was the mother culture of Egyptian cosmology? Or did ancient Nubia and ancient Egypt share a common mother culture and origins cosmology?
The Mayan calendar's knowledge of precession. In hindsight, these 2012 doomsday apocalypse prophets were clear grifters whom did not respect how ancient Mesoamericans perceived time. Quote, while it is reasonable to assume that the end of the 5,125-year cycle in 2012 was intended to indicate a major change in cycles of history, it is silly to assume that it was ever meant to be an end date. The Maya recognized cycles within cycles, some of them infinitely longer than the one that extends from 3114 BC to 2012 CE. That span of years is made up of 13 Baktuns, a unit of time which is comprised of 20 Ketuns. The prophetic Ketun cycle weaves in and out of the larger cycle of Baktuns but is separate from it. There is every reason to believe that the Maya believed that humanity would still be here and that the prophetic cycle of 13 Ketuns would still be rolling through its courses at the end of the 20 Baktun cycle in 4772 CE. End quote.
According to the ancient Mayan prophetic cycle of the 13 Ketuns, also known as the short count calendar, which is a derivation of the long count, in which there are 13 cycling Ketuns, part of a 256-year cycle, that were deeply important for Mayan forecast of political and earth events to come. Again, this was a prophetic cycle that was documented in the book of Chilam Balam, the Perez Codex, and the current Ketun that we, the collective, are currently in, that will last until the year 2032, is Ketun number 2, Ahau. And in a nutshell, the ancient Mayans forecasted that for the first half of this Ketun, food will be in good supply, and then for the second half of it, misfortune will occur. This Ketun brings the end of the authoritative order. It is a time of uniting for a cause. So, I mean, free Palestine, free the Congo, free the Sudan, free Tibet, free Turtle Island, decolonize now.
The long count certainly did not predict catastrophe in 2012, and there are multiple dates which the Maya reference far into the future beyond 2012. 2012 was simply a transition point into a new 1/5 age of the larger precessional cycle. It is interesting that the Maya speak of 5 great aeons in the precessional cycle, while the ancient Egyptian god Thoth of the Emerald Tablets was said to have witnessed 5 magnetic pole shifts on the earth. In Egyptian cosmology, there are also 5 ages of precession which correspond to the 5 phases of the sun: Khepet, dawn or awakening; Raat, late morning or maturing; Om, noon or balance; Aten, late afternoon or full enlightenment; and Amen, dusk or darkness, via Abdel Hakim Avyang and Patricia Avyang of Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism. These are not the only similarities between the ancient Maya and Egyptians. With this correspondence in mind, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Maya long count is an example of inherited sacred wisdom which was safeguarded by the priestly secret societies of ancient Mesoamerica, passed down from generation to generation. The secrets of the ancients often were only revealed to privileged people who were initiated into that wisdom in order to protect its power from misuse. Knowledge of precession and grand cycles of time often was not necessary for the uninitiated working class to understand in shamanic or animistic matriarchal cultures. Hence, in shamanic civilizations like the Maya, whom also utilized plant medicines in spiritual initiations to cultivate altered states of consciousness, it is a logical deduction to suspect that the long count calendar would have only been shared with initiated priestesses and priests after many years of training.
While skeptics doubt that the long count calendar encodes knowledge of Earth's precessional cycle, it seems that the ancient Mesoamericans were tuning into even vaster cosmic cycles which transcend the Earth's 26,000-year journey through the zodiac. In the paper, The Auric Time Scale and the Mayan Factor, the authors argue that the Mayan long count, short count, solar, lunar, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn calendars all exhibit numerical resonance via the Fibonacci sequence. It seems that parallel planetary cycles are interconnected via the phenomenon of precession. Most casual scholars of the long count are familiar that 13 Bhaktans equal 5,200 years or 1/5 of the precessional cycle. 13 Bhaktans equal roughly 1 oxacaton. Therefore, one precessional cycle equals 5 oxacatons. This number 5 is mirrored in the I Ching's 5 phases of change and the ancient Egyptian 5 phases of precession. Is there an even deeper aspect of the precessional cycle beyond the number 5? If you can believe it, the ancient Mesoamericans measured even vaster cosmic cycles related to the number 20. Next, 20 kilotonnes equals 1 Kinchilton, which equals 3,200,000 years roughly. Finally, 20 Kinchiltons equals 1 Alotun, which equals 64 million years roughly. To summarize the complex mathematics inherent in precession, mean numbers generally accepted in Western astronomy are as follows. 1 over 43,200 equals the equatorial circumference polar radius, which are the same dimensions of the Great Pyramid at Giza. 1 precessional cycle equals 25,920 years, roughly. Each zodiac aeon, as represented by the 12 zodiac signs, equals 2,160 years, roughly, and 30 degrees of the ecliptic. The precessional rate of change equals 1 degree over 72 years, i.e. 1 heartbeat of the earth equals 72 years. 72 times 30 equals 2,160 years, or 1 zodiacal aeon. 12 times 2,160 equals 25,920 years, or 1 precessional cycle. The numerology implied in precessional numbers is as follows. 72 reduces to 7 plus 2 equals 9. 43,200 reduces to 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 0 plus 0 equals 9. 25,920 reduces to 2 plus 5 plus 9 plus 2 plus 0 equals 1 plus 8 equals 9. Nikola Tesla's pyramid dimensions 3, 6, and 9 reduces to 3 plus 6 equals 9, 9 plus 9 equals 18 equals 1 plus 8 equals 9. Thus the numbers 72, 9, 6, and 3 are very important precessional numbers when studying the mysteries of the convoluted universe. Osiris of ancient Egyptian lore was said to have been murdered by 72 of Seti's crones. There are 72 syllables in the Rig Veda. The Cambodian temple Angkor Wat, an Egyptian phrase meaning the Eye of Horus, resides exactly 72 degrees east of longitude of the Giza Plateau. To observe that the true North Star moves slightly 1 degree every 72 years is profound knowledge speaking to these ancient, recolonized civilizations' true antiquity. The ancients measured when a new zodiac aeon was upon us by observing in which constellation was the rising sun housed in during the equinoxes when days and nights are of equal length.
It will seem strange, it should seem to you, that the first worship that man worshipped was not a man, not a god, but a goddess. The goddess Hathor. H-A-T-H-O-R. H-A-T-H-O-R. Hathor. Symbolized as a cow with a sun disk between her horn, which the Jews adopted and called the golden calf. The present Hindus adopted it and called it the sacred cow. When you go to Egypt right here and the western bank of the Nile, there is a temple at a place called Dendera, D-E-N-D-E-R-A-H, built in honor of goddess Hathor, and you will see 3,500 faces at each of the columns and our places of this African woman. And that's why they will have you go to Mecca and to Palestine and to, Jerusalem and to Bethlehem, but never to Egypt. Never to Egypt.
The temple of Hathor, Dendera, Egypt is all about precession. Right brain, aka feminine, consciousness invokes symbolic communication with multidimensional meanings. Whichever layer you perceive depends on your level of consciousness. Cosmic cycles symbolize movement through the ages. Sacred cosmology symbolize navigating the astral planes. Symbols decoded by Dr. Carmen Bolter and Dr. Svetlana Pavlova. The snake symbolize immortality. The solar board symbolizes a wormhole in one aspect, plus a decan, or astrological measurement of time in the ecliptic, mapping precession. Entrances to ancient Egyptian temples always feature a winged disc with serpents, symbolizing balance between yin and yang. The snake is yang, and the vulture is yin. Ancient Egyptians documented solar flares at key moments in their civilization's deep antiquity, another overlooked aspect of astrology in its original cultural context. Quote, Archaeoastronomy points to the fact that these particular planetary systems were of the utmost importance in many different cultures, and so there's something to it, the sky-ground correlation. Dr. Carmen Bolter, rest in power.
Relax and get comfortable. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow the tones to enter your embodiment.
The Dendera zodiac, which Dr. Bolter and Dr. Pavlova dubbed the calendar of catastrophes, has a total of 36 decans measuring precession. Note in each of the four corners, Scorpio, Leo, Taurus, and Aquarius, there are four feminine figures standing erect with their feet on a larger square. Also seen are four personifications of Horus, 8 total figures, with their arms refolded, corresponding to the four sides of the square. They all hold onto the cupola of the sky. On the eastern side of the zodiac to the right is also seen an image of a nude woman, the goddess Hata, with arms outstretched above her head and toes extended. The orientation of the zodiac has her head pointing to the south as seen to the right. Advanced knowledge of Earth's precessional cycle appears to be a shared foundational principle of ancient astrology in its original cultural context. The Vedic Yugas, Pralayas, Kalpas, and Manvantaras are vast cosmic cycles of the ancient Puranas text theorizing, some would say documenting, the formation of our solar system. These vast cosmic cycles resemble the classic Maya, long count calendar, and its projected interlocking time cycles. In the long count, aka Choltu, calendar there are exactly 73 rotations of the lunar Tzolk'in gear and 52 rotations of the solar half gear before a unique day and number combination, aka date, repeats. It's important to clarify that the long count, Choltu, calendar is an ancient relic which most modern Yucatek and Kit Maya daykeepers do not work with due to Catholic colonization. There are multiple stellars from press supports, Mexico with written long count dates from the Olmec period of precisely 31 BCE in an archaic Api-Olmec script. Plus there's an Olmec megalithic site at Chiapa de Corzo with a long count date of 900 BCE proving without a doubt that the mysterious Olmecs had the long count, Tzolk'in, and numbers system before the Maya. The holistic evidence is suggesting that the Olmecs were the potential source of this sacred wisdom in Mesoamerica. The 260-day sacred Tzolk'in cycle, HAP 365-day solar cycle, 9-day Lords of the Night lunar cycle, and 52-year calendar round, aka the bundle of years, cycle are all shared by Mesoamerican cultures. Perhaps the most logical deduction is that the sophisticated Olmecs are the best candidate for a long-lost mother culture in Mesoamerica. The Mesoamerican directional symbolism is also very similar to the I Ching's four faces of yin and yang. The Mayan cosmology lore of the four jaguar grandfathers and four grandmothers, aka the 8 Bialmeb, whom gave birth to the fourth world, our current era, are an interesting possible numerological link to the fundamental 8 trigrams, aka Bhagya, and their associated ascended masters of the I Ching. In the I Ching we find a parallel perception to Mesoamerica of a fourfold reality. The two I Ching broken, aka yin, and unbroken, aka yang, lines on a fundamental level when combined form the four faces of God, i.e. elder yin, elder yang, and younger yang. The number 4 to the ancient Mesoamericans also was associated with the sun having 4 phases, Venus having 4 phases, the sky's 4 quadrants, and even the Milky Way having 4 quadrants, hence the perception of the fourfold reality of the cosmos. Interestingly enough, German psychologist Carl Jung described the human psyche as having 4 aspects as well. Jung probably then perceived 4 as the authentic ancient number of wholeness. Jung seemingly did not subscribe to the Christian Trinity concept, and resonated with the ancient lore of the 4 directions. The I Ching Book of Changes is a binary and quaternary code system of divination from ancient China comprising 64 hexagrams and 8 trigrams rooted in the yin-yang principle. The 64 hexagrams of the I Ching were my first introduction to Chinese cosmology of the Tao and the ancient Book of Changes. Astrology and astronomy are inherent in divination utilizing the I Ching hexagrams. There has been thousands of years of lively debate and various ancient schools of thought surrounding the 64 hexagrams, e.g. the plum blossom method, a derivation of the rationalist image and number method versus the more traditional meaning and principle method. Although the I Ching is not an explicitly overt astrological system or zodiac as we would recognize it in Hellenistic Western astrology, deeper study reveals how the 8 trigrams and 64 hexagrams are rooted in cosmological lore corresponding with the more famous Chinese zodiac animal totems, deities of the 8 Bhagya, planets, elemental phases of time seasons, and the equinoxes solstices. Ancient China, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan also observed a longer sexagenary 60-year lunar calendar based on the 10 heavenly stems cycle, 12 earthly branches cycle corresponding with the 12 zodiac signs, and 5 phases of change. The entire plum blossom method of using the I Ching for divination is rooted in this 60-year cycle. The I Ching's mathematical sequence seemingly encodes advanced astronomical wisdom. Terence McKenna's time wave zero theory reveals that the I Ching sequence of 64 hexagrams, aka the King Wen sequence, is an inverted mirror fractal, i.e. a repeating mathematical module, such as a curve or geometric figure, in which each unit has the same statistical character as the whole. Ergo, the King Wen sequence is not random, but based on subtle rules of the Tao or Dao shifting from habit into novelty. McKenna theorizes that the King Wen sequence's structural numerology naturally reveals the foundational flux of the universe's ebb and flow throughout time. For example, 6 lines multiplied by 64 hexagrams is 384 lines. 6 times 64 equals 384 days is roughly 13 lunar cycles. 384 times 6 equals 2304 years is roughly 1 zodiacal aeon of precession. 384 times 64 equals 24,576 years is roughly 1 cycle of the precession of the equinox. McKenna proposes that the I Ching sequence of 64 hexagrams naturally enmesh with the lunar, sunspot, and precessional cycles foundational to astrology in its original cultural context. To recapitulate, at its mathematical level the I Ching is describing permutations of the quantum field driving the temporal forces which create the phenomenon we call change, aka the Tao or Tao. The I Ching is endlessly fascinating in its disruptive implications for Western material science. I would venture to say that Chinese cosmology shares more in common with Vedic astrology. However, Chinese cosmology and Mesoamerican calendar cosmology both stress the importance of year lords. In modern derivatives of metal astrology practiced by the Chinese and Kichmaya, it is not necessary to factor an individual's exact time of birth to cast an accurate horoscope. Rather, both Mesoamerican and Chinese cosmology give a core archetypal meaning or overall energy signatures to the day and year one is born into. Yes, this implies all individuals born under the same year are imprinted with similar core archetypal patterns which manifest in unique individuals' ways. E.g., in Mesoamerican calendars there are 4-day signs assigned as the 4-year lords, and each year is assigned a day sign denoting its overall energy signature in the individual's horoscope. Mesoamerican astrologers also incorporate an individual's lord of the night with their number 2 function as a moon sign. The 9 lords of the night are a unique aspect of Mesoamerican calendar cosmology. These lords represent a smaller cycle of 9 repeating nights which intermesh with the Tzolk'in and Harp cycles, each ruled by a different Mesoamerican deity which challenge humans to evolve. These lords of the night are documented as the rulers of the underworld in the sacred Popol Vuh text of the classic Maya. An individual's lord of the night may govern subconscious, primal impulses and desires. The Mesoamerican cosmology also reverses the implied archetypal meanings of yin and yang. Mayan daykeepers ascribe yang to the changeless and inner archetypes of the 20-day signs, while yin is associated with the active and fluid 13 numbers which modify the day signs, manifesting outer personality. Even though the implied meanings are reversed, the core concept of duality remains invoked, albeit with its own cultural flavor. Therefore, while Mesoamerican calendars are not a parallel system to Vedic astrology nor the I Ching, their perceived differences are mainly superficial. What they share in common could be a result of divergent evolution from a shared mother culture, or convergent evolution from different streams of cultural development.
Whilst it is fun to speculate and research about the similarities, we must honor cultural diversity and acknowledge unique achievements in intellectual refinement. It is highly likely that the increasingly popular ascendant rising sign is a unique contribution from Vedic astrology, which Mesoamerican calendar cosmology does not work with. There are always interpretive differences, and this fact is inherent in astrology as a discipline. If you subscribe to Einstein's theory of relativity, then diversity of interpretation does not translate to contradiction in authentic astrology. For example, many ancient cultures observed the circumpolar stars to establish true north in navigation, like the Big Dipper. The true north star changes across zodiacal eras during the precession of the equinoxes. Currently in the age of Pisces the true north star is Polaris, but in past ages it has been Draco and Thuban. For ancient cultures these stars would have been meaningful in ways that our current time period would not find relevant, hence, it's important to remember that in cosmology the universe is in a constant state of change. The Big Dipper is a fundamental constellation in Taoist cosmology and corresponds with the Loshu magic square. The ancient Chinese sanctified this constellation in a highly ritualized 9-step pacing ceremony still practiced in Taoist and Buddhist temples today. The Big Dipper is perceived as a liminal gateway to the heavens which corresponds with north, winter, water, darkness, mysteries, and the dragon turtle archetype. Also, this constellation was considered a spiritual guide as the Chinese shamans determined the 4 seasons by observing the Big Dipper's position as it rotates throughout its cycle. The Big Dipper constellation aka Ursa Major has been interpreted over the aeons as a bear, a wagon, or a ludlay. The bear tradition is Indo-European, appearing in Greek, as well as in Vedic India, but apparently the bear correspondence has parallels in Siberian or North American traditions. Skeptics of astrology may say this variation is proof how astrology is inherently subjective and therefore not an objective science. However, this small-minded critique is focusing on the various correspondences which are symbolic rather than the implied meaning or significance of the constellation itself. Why did so many cultures call attention to this cluster of stars? Interestingly enough, the ancient Egyptian temple of Karnak at Luxor, the holiest of holy temples during dynastic Egypt, is aligned principally to the Big Dipper. Thus, even though there have been various interpretations of implied meaning, the core archetypal idea remains the same. The Big Dipper is a spiritually significant constellation to orient one's direction in space-time. I first started studying Vedic astrology in 2019 during my yoga teacher training in Rishikesh, India and personal astropalmistry studies. I learned that yoga, Ayurveda, astrology and astropalmistry, aka Jyotish translated from the Sanskrit as the science of light or divination, are sister sciences weaving together one holistic tapestry. Vedic astrology is complex and convoluted, but paradoxically rooted in a simple 9-planet system called sidereal, which excludes the trans-Saturnian planets of modern Western tropical astrology, i.e. the system works with the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu or North Node of the Moon and Ketu or South Node of the Moon. Interestingly enough, Taoist Chinese cosmology also uses the same sidereal system of 9 planets corresponding to the 9 aspects of the Lo Shu magic square, a foundational horoscope mapping the I Ching's 8 elemental trigrams. Furthermore, we know that in the Tang dynasty of Imperial China, the royal astrologer Li Xuzong institutionalized the 10 heavenly stems and 12 branches, aka animal archetypes, cosmology system which features 28 lunar mansions. There are 27 lunar mansions aka nakshatras in Vedic astrology, with a rumored long-lost 28th nakshatra mentioned in ancient texts. Quote, the nakshatras are the central axes around which Hindu astrology revolves. Their origin is unknown. Even the Vedas give exhaustive references to them. At one time there were 28 nakshatras forming the circle of 360 degrees, but at some historical epoch of which we know but little, one of them was omitted. End quote. Rather than cause further argument about whether ancient China or India developed astrology first, I would rather suggest that these connections further support the third-party hypothesis aka long-lost mother culture theory of divergent evolution from shared inherited wisdom of the Paleolithic era, in which the I Ching was likely developed. The 27 nakshatras represent the lunar mansions, or the faster lunar rhythm, which interplays with the slower solar rhythm. Each nakshatra corresponds with a ruling planet and deity. Wuxian 5-star divination system circa 246 BC. Mercury corresponds with the sphere of law and politics. Mars corresponds with the sphere of military. Venus corresponds with the sphere of scholarship. Jupiter corresponds with the sphere of agriculture. And Saturn corresponds with the sphere of leadership. The Wuxian 5-star divination system was documented circa 246 BC, specifically corresponding the 5 phases of change: fire, water, metal, wood and earth, with Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter and Saturn. Furthermore, the fact that both ancient Vedic and Chinese astrologers work with the lunar nodes is very significant. Vedic astrology symbolizes the shadow planets of karmic law, Rahu and Ketu as a dragon's head, the north node, circling around to eat its tail, the south node, which is commonly known as the Ouroboros symbol. Meanwhile, Chinese cosmology features famous dragon iconography. I find a lot of Ketu vague mysticism in the Chinese cosmological concept of riding the dragon, implying the initiate must ride the ever-changing wave of time like a dragon, seeking your moment of chance opportunity to enact free will in response to the untamable force of fate. Are these direct similarities in cosmology a result of divergent or convergent evolution? Ultimately, Vedic astrology has the most overlap with Hellenistic astrology, since the ancient Greeks probably learned a lot of what they know during the process of occupying the Indian subcontinent, just like how Plato learned about the Atlantis legends from Egyptian priests during the Ptolemaic occupation of ancient Egypt. It is important to state that the Vedic, Mesoamerican, and Chinese civilizations most likely developed astrology throughout multiple precessional cycles of Earth, whilst the Hellenistic Greeks developed their derivation of astrology during roughly 1 to 2 zodiacal aeons in Plato's Great Year cycle. Quote, some outstanding features of the Rahu-Ketu axis are that it has greater power than the Sun and Moon, which are obscured by the shadow of Rahu and Ketu, and that it may lead to the individual toward liberation, end quote, via Bipin Bihari. Rahu and Ketu are also associated with eclipses. One of Rahu's most famous symbols is a demon swallowing the sun. Rahu and Ketu invoke shadow work of purging and shading accumulated cause and effect aka karma. Ultimately, Rahu and Ketu are mysterious forces in Vedic astrology whose challenging influences are impossible to escape yet difficult to perceive.
Take a seat for this truth bomb. Western tropical astrology is only scratching the superficial surface of astrology's significance. Quote, if the information given in Vedic astrology is true, and we are convinced it is, then all horoscopes created by Western astrologers are at least 23 degrees inaccurate to the true stars' positions. This means that the entire world of Western astrology and all horoscopes are wrong in what has to be the most colossal astrological blunder in history. Western astrology has its roots in the Greek period that dates back 1,850 years. At that time and for the previous 2,160 years, the sun was in Aries on 21st March, but it has not been so for 1,850 years. Currently, Western astrology is almost 24 degrees off from the true star positions. Quite simply, that means all Western horoscopes are incorrect in their calculations of the chart by 24 degrees, almost a whole sign. Vedic astrology did not make this mistake in calculation because Indian astronomers have been tracking the wobble of the earth for over 10,000 years. They and all other ancient systems of astrology observed this motion of the precession of the equinoxes and adjusted their calculation of the chart accordingly. End quote.
Greetings, Collective Coven. This is Trey, aka Taboo Tarot Reader, author of Astrology for Divination. And in this video, I'd briefly like to clarify why I and all my astrological and tarot work use the Vedic Sidereal Lahiri zodiac instead of the Western tropical zodiac. So if you want the full deep dive into the mysteries of precession, the precession of the equinox, and why the tropical zodiac is roughly 24 degrees inaccurate, you can check out the recent post on my page about the Vedic Lahiri zodiac. And to make a long story short and sweet, the ancient sages of what we call India, who developed Vedic astrology over multiple precessional cycles, observed that through the Earth's journey, the precession of the equinox, a roughly 26,000 year cycle, which Plato called the Great Year, there's a wobble effect that slowly and subtly affects the position of stars. And this is something that the Hellenistic Greek astrology tradition did not take into account. And this is why Vedic astrology is more accurate.
Awareness of precession of the equinoxes shows how, contrary to New Age belief, that we are still collectively in the age of Pisces. Ergo, the astronomical age of Aquarius has not yet even begun, despite what your favorite Instagram astrologer may claim. Quote, "This is definitely not the dawning of the age of Aquarius, no matter what the song proclaims or opportunistic astrologers may say. Scientifically and historically speaking, the Aquarian age will commence in the year 2376 AD. In my calculations with this Ainamsha, the sun on 20th March 2376 at the equinox is at midnight Pisces, which could indicate the beginning of the age of Aquarius. At vernal equinox of 2377, the sun is at 29:59 Aquarius, so we are in range from 2376 to 2377. However, most sidereal astrologers agree that the age of Aquarius will commence sometime between 2117 and 2600 AD. If we use Lahiri Ainamsha and calculate for the vernal equinox in the same way that Bradley did, then the equinox, or vernal point, changed from Aries to Pisces in the years 285 to 286 CE. At the vernal equinox of 285, it was midnight Aries, and in 286 it was 29:59 Pisces. Going forward to the equinox of 2438 to 2439, the same thing happens, as the vernal point slips from midnight Pisces to 29:59 Aquarius. Enlightenment, in which all beings will live in total harmony, known as Sat or Satya Yuga, is still over 5,000 years away. It's estimated to occur from 7699 to 1249-99 AD. Sat Yuga will occur during the age of Sagittarius after the completion of the age of Aquarius and age of Capricorn. For now, we are still in the age of Pisces, an epoch that has seen the gradual growth of compassion and humanitarianism linked with both positive and negative religious influences. End quote. Many modern Vedic astrologers, like at Astro Edify, calculate that the end of Kali Yuga arrived in 2025. Quote, "This leads us into centuries of transition before Dwapara Yuga, with some major earth events likely to happen in the next 20 years. On 20th March 2025, the Kali Yuga, an entire descending cycle of consciousness, will come to an end, and we will enter a long period of transition of nearly 1200 years. These transition time periods are very chaotic and pave the way for the upcoming Yuga cycle. There are 4 Yugas in total, starting from Satyug, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali Yuga respectively. The Yuga cycle is the same as the Earth's precession cycle. The position of the vernal equinox sun relative to the fixed stars of the zodiac changes very slowly at the rate of 1 degree every 71.6 years, completing the entire cycle of 360 degrees around the zodiac in about 25,800 years, roughly. In the present epoch, the vernal equinox sun is very close to the beginning of the Pisces constellation, near its boundary with the Aquarius constellation." End quote.
Greetings, this is Trey, aka Taboo Tarot Reader, author of Astrology for Divination. And for any curious students of Vedic astrology out there in the collective coven, I feel one of the most important reasons why I am drawing conscious awareness to the fact that the Vedic Lahiri zodiac is 24 degrees more accurate and more in alignment with current astronomical transits versus the Western tropical zodiac is because Western Hellenistic astrology differentiated itself from Vedic astrology by doing a lot of work with the trans-Saturnian planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Eris, etc., which Vedic astrology traditionally does not work with. Now, why is this important considering this 24-degree inaccuracy? Well, with personal planet transits like the moon and Mercury retrogrades, people may not notice this slight 24-degree inaccuracy in Western astrology, and it may not be significant. But with trans-Saturnian planets, considering they're very long ecliptic, some of them hundreds of years, 24 degrees is a big inaccuracy. And therefore, unfortunately, Saturn, for example, is currently not in Pisces, but in Aquarius. So is Western Hellenistic astrology built on a house of sand?
One of Vedic astrology's many unique contributions to astrology are the dashas. When we set the intention to forecast how a nakshatra energetically will interplay with solar transits in a given period, the overall energy signature is also subtly influenced by which dasha is at play according to the Vinshottari dasha system in Vedic astrology. Dasha in Sanskrit literally means the number 10, invoking endings and beginnings. On a deeper level, note now the Vedic symbolism of the 10 fingers and 2 hands which encode the birth chart mirror the Mesoamerican hand symbolism. The dasha's overall long-term influence can shift the ruling planet lord of a nakshatra, essentially altering the dominant subtle energy signature of the lunar mansion depending on 1. The intermission cycles at play in current timelines, and 2. The way the Dasha's ruling planet interplays with the Nakshatra's ruling planet. Authentic astrology shows that the planetary cycles and relationships with the other planets are just as important as zodiac sign placements when predicting possibilities and probabilities. Without the metaphor of the cogs in a watch, it would likely be difficult to understand the complex interplay of subtle energies in any ancient astrological discipline. To understand how events may manifest, the Dashas are a great example showcasing the convoluted complexity of the universe. Archaeoastrology as a discipline can help guide astrologers back to astrology's original intended function as developed by the elevated ancient ancestors. Awareness of the Dasha's long-term influence adds a deeper layer of interpretation to the Nakshatra's short-term influence. Ergo, the Dashas as a metaphysical concept can aid Western Hellenistic astrologers to shift our linear perceptions of time in order to cast more accurate astrological forecasts. In an astrology podcast interview with Vedic astrologer Freedom Cole about the Vinshottari Dasha system, a 120-year cycle, they discuss how this complex divination system is the standard predictive timing technique used in modern Vedic astrology. The Dasha systems divide a person's life up into different periods and subperiods that are ruled by different planets in order to study various increments of time. The Vinshottari Dasha system is the most common Dasha technique used by Vedic astrologers today, and it was first introduced in the text of Parshara. End quote. Quote from Parshara in Freedom's book, the Dasha gives two particular types of results, that based on the planet's intrinsic nature and that based on the place of residence. Know the results of the Dasha to manifest according to the nature of the planet's strength. The Dashas of Vedic astrology could also be described as subjective inner time cycles which entrain objective outer reality. The Dashas invoke a refined perception of time as intermeshing cosmic cycles of various sizes like days in a clock which transcend mundane time. Whilst the Dashas are a unique predictive technique of Vedic astrology attributed to Parshara, the underlying perception of time is very similar to Mesoamerican perceptions as encapsulated in the long count calendar. I would argue that the main differences in thought relate to short-term measurements of time, while there are clear similarities between the Vedic and Mayan grand cycles of long-term time which describe descending and ascending golden ages of precession. I intuit that differences in short-term measurements of time, contrasting similarities in long-term measurements, further support the third-party hypothesis proposing a lost mother culture is the source of advanced knowledge encoding precession. The Vedic, Mesoamerican, Chinese, and Egyptian wisdom systems all very much understood the Earth's 26,000-year precessional cycle, incorporating it into their calculations. All of the evidence begs the question, is awareness of precession convergent evolution or inherited wisdom which diverged from a shared source?
Are the primordial vestiges of archaic ideas. Numerology, known before the 20th century as arithmancy, is the belief in a divine relationship between a number and one or more coinciding events. It is also the study of the numerical value via an alphanumeric system of the letters and words and names. Remember how many ancient cultures ascribed importance to the sacred number 4 as the number of cosmic completion and balance, the 4 directions, the 4 equinoxes, solstices, the 4 faces of yin and yang, the 4 quadrants of the Milky Way, etc. Next, recall how 4 is further doubled into the important number 8, the Mesoamerican 8 Bialmed, the 4 grandfathers and 4 grandmothers, may parallel the 8 trigrams, or Bagya, of the I Ching. Whilst each wisdom system exhibits fundamental differences in interpretation, these numerological similarities could be remnants of archetypal ideas stemming from a third-party mother culture. For example, the number 13 is very important in the Chinese, Mesoamerican and Vedic astrology's lunar cycles. Remember that the I Ching's 384 lines of the 64 hexagrams correspond with 13 lunar cycles. There are cycles of 13 Katans, 13 Bhaktans, and 13 lunar numbers, or Tresinas, in Mesoamerican calendar cosmology. Meanwhile, in Vedic astrology there are 13 lokas, or dimensional spheres, and 27 nakshatras, each measuring 13 degrees of the ecliptic in Vedic astrology. These numerical connections are perhaps foundational in nature, relating to the natural measurement of time, and thus a result of convergent evolution. Or these numerical connections could be a transfer of knowledge inheritance which diverged from a shared mother culture. Many practitioners of Vedic astrology often interpret the 27 nakshatras, aka the lunar mansions or subtle moon signs, primarily by the nakshatra's ruling planet. However, This is a compartmentalized approach which has not fully integrated cyclical consciousness, blocked by linear perceptions of mundane time. Let's consider how a nakshatra represents both 13 degrees of the zodiac, an increment or measurement of time-space, and a covert lunar rhythm which interplays with the overt solar rhythm. Conclusion: decolonize your horoscope. Despite systemic differences in ancient astrology, I observed patterns of similarities triangulating key metaphysical concepts like 1. Duality aka polarity, 2. Kundalini energy, 3. Subtle energy centers or chakras in the human body, 4. Knowledge of precession of the equinoxes, 5. Cyclical nature of sacred time is like intermeshing cogs in a watch, 6. Multidimensionality, 7. Acausality or synchronicity of space-time, 8. Sacred mathematics and numerology, and 9. The mirror principle, i.e. geomancy mirrors cosmology and the biological microcosm mirrors the celestial macrocosm. The implications of shared spiritual synergies in ancient thought imply intriguing insights about the true origins of human civilization in deep antiquity. We may never know how old astrology and astronomy truly are, nor whether its path of cultural development was divergent or convergent evolution. What is life without a little mystery? Sometimes a mystery is fun to explore just because it's a mystery, calling us into the great unknown. However, it is indisputable that knowledge of precession existed in the extremely distant past. The implications of archaeoastrology are deeply humbling and may make one feel very tiny and insignificant, like a speck of dust floating through the universe, a mere momentary flash. Awareness of precession can cause a profound shift in human consciousness, and for this reason, was considered sacred by our ancient ancestors. This is why one had to be initiated to gain access to this wisdom in order to protect its power from misuse. Knowledge is power, just to know. Unfortunately, it seems that to be conscious in a patriarchal world which values unconsciousness is dangerous. Perhaps this is why so many modern humans are quick to deflect, devalue, and discard the cosmology of the ancient matriarchal world.
Why does archaeoastrology ultimately matter or mean anything worthy of study? Archaeoastrology is a means to decolonize astrology. Social media sun sign-based astrology utilizing the Gregorian calendar is a distorted delusional fantasy. Money-lust has delegitimized the ancient art of astrology, severed it from original cultural context, and repackaged it as something that it's not. In order to legitimize astrology, we must reconnect with its roots in meaningful ways which challenge our critical thinking skills to develop discernment. Nobody or no one culture owns astrology, and people will engage with it however their level of understanding permits. However, some cultures have been refining astrology for aeons in divergent ways which must be acknowledged as unique contributions from that lineage. When we acknowledge that astrology was sacred to our ancient ancestors, then this awareness naturally engenders a different approach rooted in truth, respect, and reverence. If any astrologer is triggered by the calling to decolonize astrology, then they are not someone who frankly is concerned with truth and probably haven't read this far anyway. There is nothing sacred about the hordes of mediocre narcissists claiming online to be astrologers whom have co-opted astrology, the tarot, numerology, etc. to gain power, money, and a constant energetic supply in the algorithm. There is a lot of karma to unpack when deconstructing colonization, which inevitably boils down to racism, narcissism, and energy vampirism. If you live in the global north like me, I acknowledge that our entire way of living is based on a system of exploitation and harm which has colonized the global south. I believe that by decolonizing the conditioned mind, we set an intention to come into right relationship with the ancient ancestors who gifted us the wisdom systems which have enlightened our souls with curiosity. For those who come from severed lineages, i.e. white people, the lack of authentic spiritual sustenance as children can quickly transform us as adults from humble seekers into entitled spiritual capitalists. We must recognize that we only have access to sacred wisdom systems from other cultures because of our privilege and whiteness. If you profit off another lineage's wisdom system without acknowledgement of the imbalanced power dynamic, then you are complicit in the past and present colonization of those cultures. Archaeoastrology has been the medium through which I personally decolonized my astrological world. Through this intellectual journey, I shifted from using the inaccurate tropical zodiac to the sidereal Lahiri zodiac. Through this journey, I discovered that the cultural taboo surrounding astrology is a byproduct of white supremacy culture. Anyone who delegitimizes astrology without self-inquiry is belittling the capabilities of the elevated ancient ancestors. It is possible that the ancients knew things of value that our civilization currently does not understand. Only a modern egomaniac stuck in colonizer consciousness would claim that we have nothing of value to learn from the achievements of advanced civilizations like China, India, and Mesoamerica. With deep humility, I acknowledge that authentic astrology in its original cultural context was most likely developed by BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color, of the global South majority.
Thank you for tuning in. Om Shivaya.